So thank you both for taking the time to be here to share your experience and your expertise. We'll just start off, and Darren, you're up at the top, so I'll have you go first. If you want to share your name, I know you have your pronouns, but if you can share those as well, and then a little bit about yourself, the setting you're in, the school, and so forth.
Hey everybody. Just want to say thank you to Black Lives Matter at school for having both of us. I live in the Seattle area. I was worked in Seattle school district, was part of not the very initial resolution that got passed in Seattle for Black Lives Matter at school, but it was my first month of teaching. I took part in the initial first day of lessons, and then was very active in all the Black Lives Matter at school organizing from 2016 for about 7 years. And then for the last couple of years, I've been in a school district just south of Seattle. I teach Spanish and history classes. Um, and I guess the last thing I'll just say is I very much feel the weight of all of the attacks on speaking truth, teaching truth, and just wanted to say that's the reason I'm not mentioning more specifics about where I'm at exactly, because there's a real attempt to try to crack down on educators' ability to be themselves and to speak truth. And I think many teachers around the country are feeling that.
Thank you for acknowledging that reality and just recognizing that it's all over. There's no one city where you have to be concerned. Really, throughout the country, people are experiencing fear regarding teaching curriculum that aligns with history. Christian, if you can share a little bit about the setting that you're in and the grade that you teach and how long you've been teaching.
Sure. Yeah. My name is Christian, and I teach at a independent school here in DC. I have been teaching for going on, I think, 13 years now. I've been like a licensed teacher. I've been involved in just different things throughout my life over the last, at least, I would say, 15 years and 20 years since I was in high school, just in local organizations and things. But I currently, where I teach literature. I think one of the things that's like Darren mentioned, like teaching truth, is also, teaching truth through history as well as the novels and literature we read as they reflect societies at the time, so the historical context. And also, I won't go into too many more specifics as well, just because, just to echo in this, and I actually saw an interview that Ethan Hawke gave. He talked about like this moment of like fear that's just kind of in the air, but
Hmm.
also not to not to ever, get away from talking about these things, but also being strategic and how can we maintain being able to do this work. And part of that is also just why would we show all of our cards right now?
Yeah,
Let's be
yeah.
strategic.
I think that's important to name is their strategy in the choices that we're making, right? They're not just abstract choices. This year, our principles are globalism and loving engagement. And when I say loving engagement, and obviously with BLM, we have a specific definition of that. But Christian, I'll start with you. When you hear the phrase loving engagement, what does it mean to you personally? How does it show up in the spaces that you help create?
Sorry, I muted because I didn't want my cat meowing to be interrupted. I think it goes back to earlier we talked about like teaching truth. Like love engagement is telling the truth. Like I'm going to try to be really intentional about making sure I'm naming where I'm sharing my information and where I'm sharing my knowledge and understanding.
Hmm.
And I've been really leaning into a lot of what Bell Hooks talks about with, with love and being, rooted in accountability and not
Hmm.
avoiding the moment. So part of being engaging lovingly is to try your best to be true to who you are and what you're able to contribute and being
Hmm.
honest and being honest with yourself, honest with your students. I take that really important that I see loving engagement as accepting each other for who we are, being honest, being truthful, and also accountable for what you want to
Right.
do. Because part of being loving is being accountable to what you say you're going to do, you do.
Thank you. Thank you. Bell Hooks is my person of the year Each year I pick a person whose words can follow me and inspire me. So she's done so much work on what does it mean to be in community. So I appreciate you lifting up her name. Darren, what are you thinking about loving engagement? How do you think about that word and what does that mean for the spaces that you help create?
Sure. Is it okay if I read the Black Lives Matter school definition first, just for
Yeah.
purposes of like if there's any new people who maybe haven't seen the website, and then I'll tell you what I think real quick. So, according to the Black Lives Matter at school, the 13 guiding principles, loving engagement, quote, we remain rooted in compassion and empathy by seeking understanding and engaging with intent to learn about and connect with others' contexts. Our interactions are guided by a commitment to embody justice, peace, and liberation. So for me, from like the moment kids walk in the room, like I have a big giant. It's basically this hoodie.
Hmm.
I don't know how many years ago we got BLM at schools had the giant black banner, so I have a huge one of
Hmm.
those, so it's really clear where I stand. I have a big LGBTQ flag up. I have a great poster. The first time when Colin Kaepernick and I think it was Eric Reed kneeled down to protest the national anthem, and it's in Spanish, Las vidas negras cuentan. So I have lots of just different posters and pictures of different leaders throughout history, so like kids just know like where I stand when they walk in the room. Uh,
Hmm.
and then beyond just sort of seeing that, for me, it's all about what we teach, how we talk to kids, that we are constantly building community, that we're listening, we're respecting the diversity of voices. Our textbooks tend to be really poor in terms of the quality, very white centered. So trying to use um, articles and books and videos of educators of color and leaders of color throughout history so that kids can see themselves because, depending on where you teach, most public schools still to this day, obviously, are mostly students of color. Even in, the area that I live in is not as diverse as some parts of Seattle, but students of color are still a majority of the students. Um,
Hmm.
and so I just think it's important to use so that they see voices that look like them. And I just think it's really important to build community with uh, parents and with the community that's around us.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Just recognizing that before you even say anything, students are looking around the room. They're trying to find those signs about who you are and what you think. I often say, even the background on your computer can tell people a little bit about you. And students are paying attention to those things that you might not always be as intentional about. So it's important to be more intentional about the space that you're creating physically in your room. We all mentioned that this is a difficult time, not just in a political climate, but realizing for people specifically in education that are being attacked. Darren, I'm curious, how have you supported those who are new to this work or just beginning to understand the importance of it?
Okay. I think maybe in follow-up questions, I'll talk more about some of the Seattle history. But I'll focus on my new district because my new district is not Seattle. Whereas Seattle has been doing this for almost a decade. It's actually
Hmm.
2016 technically is the 10th anniversary.
Yep.
Um, the new district uh, has not passed any kind of resolution, and I'm the advisor for the Black Student Union at my school. Uh, and so we're talking with the kids last year about what do you all think? I showed them the website, the principles, the demands. Which one of these, do you feel so moved about? What do you all, do you want to organize around this? And of course, kids were excited about it. But my union has passed resolutions, and I helped to raise resolutions, to get the union on board the last couple of years. Uh, but isn't anywhere near the systematic work that's taken place in places like DC and Seattle and Philadelphia and elsewhere. Um, so we put together a resolution kind of following the model of Seattle that they had passed at school board meetings for years. and organize some parents and organize a couple Black student unions from different schools to go to the district and propose it. And so there was maybe 10 or so youth and parents and educators that got up to speak. So I think that that's the type of thing that everybody can do. Now, unfortunately, the district didn't pass it, and that's a whole nother conversation. But I think attempting to, wherever you are at, um, initiating that process with youth, parents, educators to put it out there, because it's never going to pass if you don't raise it. Um,
Mhm.
I'm also be giving a presentation at my union meeting on Monday to kind of kick off the week. So, um, no matter who you are, obviously I'm white. And I think, it's one of the follow-up questions later on. Like, it shouldn't just be the work of Black educators. We need
Yeah,
white educators to step up and not be afraid to talk about this and to have the ability to talk about this stuff.
right. So what I'm hearing is really making it collaborative. So I'm working with the students, I'm working with the parents, I'm working with the educators as a whole rather than just working with one particular group. So
Correct.
thank you for that. Christian, what do you do to help people when they're just starting to learn and need to understand why this work is important?
Mhm. I mean, I think really sometimes people, when they feel they want to get involved in the work, the first part is they're feeling something, right? We all have these moments in our lives where we feel activated, right? We feel this is kind of push where we want to be involved in something in some way, and we sometimes think that we need to go for the big flashy, like, oh, I'm gonna instantly go and try to, you know, lead something, and through the lens as a white person, like there's historical precedent. Like oftentimes we're told about the history of whiteness through the lens of supremacy, but there's also the lens of people who try to, disrupt white supremacy and have been involved in anti-racist work for as long as we can go back. We can think back to early days with even John Brown, right? We can talk about Anne Braden. We can talk about different people like Dottie Zellner and SNCC, right? Like, and there's people who've been organizing in supportive roles, but it's important that people that are new, they have to learn that history, right? We have to
Mhm.
learn. So the thing that I push people to do is to learn, read, read, learn, and listen. And then lead should not be just even in the top 10 of the things you try to do currently, right? As
Right.
especially the white educators. But then it goes back to what Darren is saying. If you're in a space like where I'm currently at, in a space where there you are one of the white people, like, and I'm in the middle school level where none of the teachers out of the four of us are Black.
Mhm.
Does that mean that I don't teach history? No, I have to teach that history. It's a responsibility. It's a responsibility we all have, as Darren mentioned, to do this work. And but people that are new to it, that want to get involved, they need to learn how do you learn to decenter yourself? How do you learn to be
Mhm.
the fly on the wall? I think that's one of the things, and also that we're not perfect. We're not going to get it perfectly. It's so easy for us as human beings sometimes to think like, oh, I play a basketball game. I made 30% of my shots. That was a good game. But then when we
Right.
talk about the work, if you're only doing 40, 50% things right, you end up being like, nope, I can't do the work anymore because I wasn't perfect. And it's like, no,
Mhm.
like you can't be perfect. It's going to be impossible. You're always going to feel like you're not doing enough. So you have to be able to, as Megan Bowler, to the professor out of the University of Colorado, I talked about like pedagogy of discomfort. You have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. And
Right.
that's something we have people that are new to the work have to learn to be able to do. How can you sit in a space where you're so used to being in spaces where you're doing a lot of talking, be in a space where you can just not talk at all and just do what you're
Mhm.
told? That's something
Yeah.
that's hard for us as white people to do too, right? Listen, learn.
Thank
That's a
you
big
for
part.
that. Of really that it's not just the moment. There's something that happens that activates us, but we're coming in with a history and an approach, and we have to start checking ourselves and learn what does it look like in this space. What do you wish people understood about what does it mean to do this work collectively? And if you can share a specific experience when you worked alongside others and really were able to show the impact of collective work. And Christian, I'll let you go first this time.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, like for example, when Philly was really taking on a lot of this work with Black Lives Matter at school through the leadership of, and I won't name names because I didn't get the permission to say names, but there were people that kind of led some of the stuff that was going on in Philly, and through different organizations like the Melanated Educator Collective and, of course, Black Lives Matter at School in Philly. And then part of it was, oh, I want to be involved in that. How can I be involved? And some of the stuff they talked about was, well, actually start teaching the principles, start talking about the principles. So I was like, okay, so going through that lens and also document the history. So that's part of the part two is keeping memory. So how I could work alongside is sometimes I can work alongside without being in any of the actual meetings or being part of, or having my name on a list or being a member per se. I can
Hmm.
support by just doing what is being asked to be done. So like, okay, I'm in a classroom. I'm going to teach the principles. I'm going to talk about the history of how Black Lives Matter was formed, how a hashtag changed the world, and how, uh, help students understand that history. So that's some of the early days, as well as being a part of like protests, whether that's putting up wheat paste posters, sharing information, and I guess another specific thing is where I grew up in Ohio, we had this organization called Involvement Advocacy, and part of the thing was like we would through the University of Dayton kind of organize and come together and share art, how we amplify
Hmm.
art and poetry and also getting and volunteering after school programs. I volunteered with like America Reads and just sitting with kids and helping them read. So like there's different ways in which we can support in this small ways, but also it could be as simple as, hey, I'm here. I'm not gonna rush you to like get me involved and take up time to teach me how to do this stuff. Like I'm here. If you need me to read an email, I'm here to read an email. Or if you need me to, you want me to put together a document, I'll put together a document. Like that's the thing too, is also um, getting involved in doing this work is just about being patient. And
Hmm.
also it's not glamorous. It's not, none of this is going to be glamorous. I think sometimes we want to think it's glamorous and quick, but also I have I think my biggest role currently in doing this work is documenting, naming, teaching, helping students investigate systems, um, going into like, Hillary Jenks is another professor who talks a lot of work around um, like like critical literacy and then
Hmm.
Richard Hill Collins, the matrices of oppression. So like helping students understand like how do you name a system if you don't know it's there? So how do you even disrupt it? So like helping
Right.
students understand power dynamics and investigating that. But really some of my early work has always been just learning, learning, learning. Like you can never learn enough.
Right.
And you can never listen enough, right? Like so but in Philly particularly just doing BOMAS work as being told, like, hey, this is what you should be doing, do it. And then in DC at the private school that I'm at, really trying to push the school to back up what it's saying in its mission. Okay, you're saying these things
Right.
in the mission. How do we organize? How do we actually like one ask for more diverse like staff? How do we push for more diverse curriculum, and more intentional curriculum?
Hmm.
And like Rudine Sims Bishop's and Debbie Reese's work on windows and mirrors, right? So like just going into that work and just being and also being intentional about naming it. Like we can teach the pedagogy, we can teach um, the, the critical lenses, but just making sure that we're giving credit where credit is due.
Thank
Um,
you for that. I
so
think there's a lot to it, and
sorry,
what
there's a
I
lot
heard,
I could say, but it's just a lot.
I
It's just a
know,
lot.
right? But what I heard in it is what's your lane? Where are you at? Where are your opportunities? And recognizing that oftentimes the grunt work is the work that needs to be done, and being willing and able to do that is important. Darren, what do you think about what does it mean to do this work collectively? And if you can share specific of how you worked alongside others.
So I think the whole history of Black Lives Matter at school, the story starting in Seattle, then what the Philly educators did up to today is just a perfect lesson. Um, the only way first, just on the history, like the only way anything ever changes is by collective, massive action. Eventually, we need millions and millions of people getting involved, finding a way to unite, whether it's abolishing slavery, civil rights struggle, and then any of the number of incredible struggles, Black Lives Matter at school, Me Too, the No Kings rallies, all that stuff. Like in the moment that we're in, what's happening in Minneapolis right now, the days without work, shopping, and school. So just general history, we have to organize. In terms of specifics, everything that has to do with Seattle and this movement spreading is all about collective. Like, I also won't mention individual names. I would love to, just to honor the incredible work people have done. But some of the organizations like the NAACP Youth Council has been the main youth organization in Seattle that has been there from almost the beginning, and every year or two, new youth step up as others graduate from high school and get involved. Uh, Washington Ethnic Studies Now has done incredible work. Um, I definitely want to name that I know in Philly, and I know also in Seattle and elsewhere that maybe not everywhere, but in a lot of places this has taken place. There have been organized reform caucuses of educators. In Seattle, it was originally the social equity educators. Now it's the Seattle Caucus of Rank and File educators who've come together not just around Black Lives Matter at school, but seeing like we need to have a different vision of both what schools in our city and state and country should look like, but also the way our unions should function. Um, because one of the strongest ways to change the way our schools are set up is through the collective power of educators and various workers within public schools coming together within their union. In terms of just
Thank you.
specific, can I just say one other thing? Like the
Yeah,
specific,
of course.
the just this, so people know. Um, the actual organizing of it, it just doesn't happen. Like in Seattle, it took educators at an elementary school standing up to like white supremacists, essentially, that were talking about bombing. A Black Men United for Change wanted to stand outside of school and high five kids as they're coming in. And then it took educators saying, we're going to stand in solidarity with you to pass a resolution. Um, it took educators to plan lessons. But then every year since then, it's taken sometimes, definitely weeks and usually months of like meticulous Zoom meetings, sometimes Zoom, sometimes in person, where youth and educators are coming together to plan it out. And then it took national organizing. Like I can remember back in the summer of 2017 at a United Caucus of Rank and File Educators conference in LA. That's where I first met some of the Philly crew, and where we started to talk about, wow, okay, Seattle did this, and then Philly turned it, Seattle did a day, Philly turned it into a week. How do we start to make this a thing that can actually be ongoing? And then, in the months and within the next year, I think is when the, official national Black Lives Matter at school. So my point is, this stuff doesn't just happen. It takes people having meetings. It takes patience. It takes months. And in this case, it's taken years to kind of build the infrastructure that exists um, to be what it is today.
Thank you for that. What I heard and what I think is important to note is that it's not just one pot, it's not just one group. It requires youth, it requires educators, it requires what you're doing in the classroom, what the union's doing. And really, in order to do work collectively, you have to come at problems and situations through various lenses and groups of people. That's what I heard in what you were saying. Thinking about one of our principles, specifically diversity, it states, we recognize, accept, and celebrate the unique qualities that make us different and the shared perspectives, circumstances, and commonalities that connect us. How do you bring that idea of diversity into your classroom practices? And Darren, I'll start with you in teaching Spanish specifically. How do you bring in that celebration of unique qualities that make us different and our shared perspectives and circumstances?
Yeah, I think we both have touched on this because it
Hmm.
just comes in throughout everything that we do. I just think it's really crucial because I mean, I teach history too, so I can talk about it from both perspectives, but like our textbooks tend to be so Eurocentric, and even when they do mention uh, struggles or history that involves people of color, sometimes it's comes from a very deficit mind, like the horrible stuff that's happened and the leadership and the struggles and the joy and the celebration and the culture and all that stuff doesn't come through. So I just um, like I for me with Spanish, and in some ways it's easy because it's the vast majority of Spanish speakers in the world are people of color. If you're saying outside of Spain, and the history of Spanish colonialism and then the resistance to that, all the most, all the countries we study is Central and South America, and all the countries that have a history of like resisting Spanish colonialism. So it's just for me, it's about are there, I teach first year Spanish, so there's only so much depth we can get into in terms of hearing. Like, I can't read a book yet in Spanish or
Right.
long videos, but it's like, are there, you know, articles that are age and skill level appropriate? Are there videos? Just like I'll do for Black History during Hispanic Heritage Month, uh, put together slides where, short videos, short bios of people throughout Latin America, Spanish speakers and folks from the US, just so kids know that it's not just a language, there's a history there. I also think it's really important to talk about concrete issues. So especially today, issues around immigration and all the racist, horrible rounding up, racial profiling, jailing, deportations, the murders of Renee Good, um, Keith Porter in LA, Alex Pretty, like making sure that kids know this stuff is not acceptable. Um,
Mhm.
and that we again, going back to collective struggle, it's something that, ultimately it is up to each child. Now, this is what I've been instructed to say from district authorities. It's up to each child to determine what they do with this information. We cannot tell kids what to do, but we know from Friday that a lot of kids were moved. I know kids at my school organized a walkout yesterday, and I was really proud of that. Um, in opposition to all the racist attacks on immigrants.
What I heard and what you were saying is the diversity of notion of what this means and who that is, right? I I know, having learned Black history and even the little bit I took Spanish for 2 years, it's the same three names. So the diversity comes in learning more names, learning more stories,
Yep.
hearing different perspectives, even if it's still in that same movement, in that same country. But we often don't get the breadth of knowledge about all of the people. And so we're not able to recognize all the unique qualities. It's easier to lump everybody together. That's what I heard in what you were saying is the uniqueness comes through learning more stories.
Mhm.
Christian, what are you thinking about for how you bring that idea of diversity into the classroom, which is our definition is recognize, accept, and celebrate the unique qualities that make us different and the shared perspectives, circumstances, and commonalities that connect us.
Yeah, I mean, you and Darren both touched on a lot of what I currently do in my classrooms and what I have done in previous spaces. And a big part of it is you need to build relationships with the students you teach, because how can you you can't how can you assume diversity or assume that students are interested in a certain thing because of how they look or how they act? You need to get to really get to know them so that you can,
Mm-hmm.
have those relationships, and then you can be intentional about the curriculum that you design, because you can know what students know, you can know what students don't know, and of course we don't know what we don't know, right? So like helping students build criticality so they can seek diverse text on their own as well, because
Mm-hmm.
we want to be able to curate in diverse text and be intentional for them. But we also want to help students develop that criticality to where they can seek out information and be able to figure that out themselves. And it's a skill. It's something that needs to be developed, nurtured, and supported. Um, Darren also touched on just multiple modalities, which I also support too. Is like we have very diverse, different types of learners. Like me myself, like I sometimes it's ironic because I teach literature, but I sometimes myself struggle finishing an entire novel, like just reading the text. So audiobooks, helping students understand that there are different ways to, as Freire said, to read the world, right? We can look at
Mhm.
text, we can watch movies, we can, have high engagement, but also um, teach students important skills, right? So like literacy, different types of literacies, that's important for diversity, bringing in different identities and interests. Also, what you talked about, Sam, is like, we often with diversity always talk about celebrating, which is super important to also celebrate, but also understand the nuances around these like diverse places people are, and highlight people that often don't get talked about, right? So,
Mhm.
and don't try to create stuff from scratch. I'm just going to say like I use a lot of resources that are already available to us, like Black Lives Matter at School has a whole bunch of resources on Arena that you could use when you're talking about different aspects of history. Student Nonviolence Coordinating Committee through the SNCC Digital Literacy Project has a bunch of stuff to their legacy project, like so much information about different movements across regions, cities. Then, of course, with the Black Panther Party, there's many former members that are still alive that have published their own memoirs, their own
Mhm.
autobiographies, there's resources. We can learn from these movements of the past, and they laid out blueprints to how we can teach and educate students today, from liberation schools, freedom schools, all kinds of different free liberation schools, like all kinds of different spaces that have already been done. Why are we don't need to reinvent the wheel of how we can
Right.
approach curriculum.
Thank you. Thank you. Obviously, we're Black Lives Matter at school, and we made an intentional effort when we started our steering committee that we would be an all Black steering committee. And there are various reasons that went into that decision. And we know that oftentimes the people leading this work in schools are not Black individuals. What responsibilities do individuals and institutions have in ensuring Black Lives Matter at school for white and non-Black educators in particular?
Joy, me and
Sure.
Darren
I
too.
wanted to leave it open, whoever wanted to jump in on that.
So I'll be quick with this response because it is something that it's a through line of what I just mentioned. Like there's there's precedent for that, right? It goes back to we often talk about windows and mirrors, but there's also curtains. There are spaces that us as white people have to be comfortable and okay with not being a part of for the sake. Like we often talk about the biggest interrupters to uh, Black people being able to organize is often white people. Like we sometimes, like, especially sometimes even liberal white people, we get in the way of organizing, and sometimes being a good co-conspirator is sometimes is you don't need to be in the room where it happens, right? You can let people meet, let them tell you what to do, and you go aye, and you go do it. But also like there's precedent for that. SNCC had tried with the White Folks Project. They had sent people for the Mississippi Freedom Summer. They had sent white people to other white neighborhoods to try to organize. Like that's the big thing that us as white people can do is talk to other white people. So
Right.
that's a big responsibility that we have to take on. And sometimes it's one of the more challenging ones. Sometimes it's easy to go speak into a space where you're already preaching to the choir. You're not telling anybody anything new. To then go tell other white people like, hey, we are the problem. We're part of the problem. That's tough, but it's important to do.
Thank you for that. Darren, what are you thinking the responsibility is different for white and non-Black educators? So how do you think they can uphold and uplift this work as individuals and within institutions?
So I think it's not always easy, just to sort of say that up front. Um, but I think a couple things that white people have to be comfortable with taking the lead from African Americans. So I think it's great that the Black Lives Matter School steering committee is all uh, Black people, Black educators. I think that's great. Um, I think history is littered with, you could make a pretty good argument that, some of the struggles that I mentioned, whether it's the abolishing slavery, civil rights movement, some of the most, certainly the recent anti-police brutality, Black Lives Matter movement, several of the most important movements throughout U.S. history have been led by African Americans. So I think it's important for white people to sometimes just shut up and listen and learn. Having said that, though, if you look at our schools, it's impossible, and we cannot uh, create a space where the small number of black or um, brown educators in our schools have to be the leaders on all this stuff. And
Mm.
in Washington State, just a couple statistics real quick. The It's gotten a little bit better, but barely. The number of white teachers in my state is 88%. There's about five, and this is about 5 years. I couldn't find any more recent numbers. There's about 5% Latinx, uh, around 1% American Indian, Alaskan Native, and black teachers is 1.4%. So
Mm.
how can we in a state that has 1.5% black educators build an anti-racist movement, and a particular movement like Black Lives Matter at school, with putting the burden of leading this movement on, barely over 1% of the educators? And if you have colleagues who are black, you know that they're getting hammered. They just on a daily basis they're getting hammered because they have to deal with all the racism that exists in society and all the racism that exists within our schools. So my point is, we have to both lead, but also understand that it was white people who made this mess in the first place. It was white racists, white supremacists who started the enslavement of Africans. And so we have a responsibility to be at the heart of collaborating and listening and learning, but also not being afraid to like put ourselves out there and lead discussions in our union meetings, lead discussions in our classrooms, be a part of going to school board meetings, be a part of going to the state legislatures, city governments, whatever, we have to play a role in this. It's just not fair, given the role that white people have played in creating this mess, to expect black and brown people to have to try to solve the mess that our ancestors created.
I know y'all both mentioned a lot, so I'm going to ask you to boil it down for me. When we think about students, educators, and community members who are going to be watching this, what is one shift in mindset or practice that could move us toward creating that equitable school communities across the nation? So you can name, like I said, a mindset or a practice that can start moving us forward. And Darren, I'll let you go first.
Okay, so we've hammered home a lot the importance of collective mass action organizing. So beyond that one, I think the one of the other thing that's really crucial, especially in this time of the Trump administration, is the idea of intersectionality and the importance of connecting issues. Um, when this current government is going after women and trans people and queer people and immigrants and African Americans and um, people in Venezuela and people in Iran, and on and on and on. Like, we have to do the flip side. We have to build a movement that says, you know what, we're going to stick together. We are going to stand up to all the different types of exploitation, all the different types of oppression, which means we have to listen, we have to be uncomfortable. Um, we are going to, I know I can't wait for the last question because I'll say more about it, but like, we need to live in a radically different planet than the one that we do now. Without getting into those specifics, if we're ever going to get there, it's going to take literally billions of people around the planet realizing that we have more in common with each other than we do with the people who are literally destroying the environment, oppressing people all around the world. Um, we're going to have to stick together. So finding a way to connect issues, connect struggles, to me is crucial. We have to come together and find a way to unite.
Thank you. All right, Christian, one practice or mindset that students, educators, and community members watching can start to shift.
Um, I mean, there's a lot. I think one of the things that we can do, building on this idea of intersectionality, is also just understanding that this is a marathon. It's a lifelong practice. Do not seek, like, we ultimately have the ultimate hope of that product, of that liberated world that Darren is talking about. But you have to be willing to live your life knowing that it might not happen in your lifetime, right?
Hmm.
In the same way that we have goals and aspires that we want to accomplish, you do not give up that hope that it could happen. You might not see it, but it still could happen. And that's the thing that's
Hmm.
hard for us to live with because we're living in society. We want instant gratification. But I am telling you, with this work, it's even with progress, there's even arguments between what's seen as progress is more nuanced than that. Like when we
Hmm.
look at the work of Derek Bell of critical race theory and the permanence of racism, we talk, like we could look at Brown v. Board and people want to instantly celebrate it as this big accomplishment, but then you also have to dig deeper and talk about, well, like what Darren mentioned with the eradication of the representation of education and educators, Black educators, a lot of that was due a result of Brown v. Board, right? So like
Hmm.
it's there's nuance, but we
Hmm.
have to understand that with progress, there's shifts backwards and forward, and it's turbulent. But in these turbulent
Hmm.
times, the shift you have to make is your boat might not make it to the other side while you're alive, but you have to
Right.
pass on that baton and
Hmm.
just keep at it, just keep going.
All right, Darren, you were excited for the last question, so I'll let you kick it off. And then, Christian, if you would like to add, if we truly believed in collective value, and for us, when we say collective value, we're looking at all of the things, all of the little pieces we break into. So, our sex assigned at birth, our gender identity, gender expression, our orientation, our economic status, our ability, our disability, education, location, age, immigration status, religious belief or not belief, that none of us are free until we all are free. That is the goal that we name in collective value. If we believed in that, how would our schools and our communities look, feel, or function differently?
So I don't know if my imagination is ever going to be good enough to really fully answer this, but it's something that I've spend not just around schools, but like the world around us. I spend a lot of time and have for probably 30 some years thinking about what kind of different world could we live in. Um, so let me just say, like last year, my school district lost around $15 million
Mm,
budget cuts. So I teach at a middle school. The middle schools no longer have a librarian. We have one less assistant principal. We lost our part-time tech person and at least one other, full-time staff person to kind of help with interventions with students and discipline and community and restorative justice, that kind of stuff.
mm,
Um, so that's the opposite of every single school should have a librarian, should have full slate of counselors and not
mhm,
with, ratio of 400 or 500 to 1, but, at least 250 to 1, or in an ideal world, way less than that.
right.
Uh, Class sizes. I mean, the average class size, depending on your union contract, is anywhere from middle and high school 28 to 32 kids. I don't know what the ideal one it should be, but I would say maybe 10, 15 kids, like more teachers. Um, should have full slates of books. We should have, as a language teacher, multiple languages not being taught, not just Spanish for a tiny chunk of the kids. Kids should
Mhm,
be able to learn Chinese, should be able to learn Arabic. We should be out, have more hands-on learning projects where we're out in the community working, various, whether it's businesses or libraries or, parks, like getting kids out in the world. Um, Funding. Let me just talk about funding for a second. The federal education budget for last year was $82 billion. dollars. In Washington State, this is really important to me. We have three of the 15 richest people on the planet live here. Steve Ballmer makes 118 billion. Jeff Bezos makes 215 billion and Bill Gates makes 108 billion. What kind of world are we living in when three men, white men, make what is that, upwards of between 4 and 500 billion dollars? Um, and our schools don't have librarians. Our class sizes are way too big. There should be, funding spent to be able to radically change who's hired. We should have, uh, there shouldn't be 1.5% Black teachers. It shouldn't be 1% uh, American Indian teachers. It shouldn't be 5, 6% Latinx teachers. So it's just like so many things need to change about the way that our schools are set up, and tying it to the community. We cannot have, and what's going on right now, like it is a nightmare scenario for immigrant students right now. So we cannot have our government hunting down immigrant families and their kids. Kids cannot learn in that kind of environment. We cannot have jail populations of like hundreds of thousands or millions of people and expect kids to, when their parents are locked up, oftentimes for BS drug charges or whatever. That all those sorts of things need to change. Housing costs, like all the putting to the screws of families struggling to pay bills, struggling to pay rent, not having health care, not having retirement, all these things. My point is, all these societal things also have to change because they
Hmm.
affect the way that our kids learn. Um, you want your parents to be able to have more of a day-to-day involvement. Well, oftentimes they can't because they're working two jobs or
Right,
because of all these. So it's about our schools. It's also about thinking bigger and broader about our society as a whole and changing it. And um, that's the, it's going to have to happen collectively. I would
right.
love to have a conversation with the kiddos and with the parents every time we have a union contract coming up. What sort of
Hmm.
things do we all think collectively? And building a movement to say, legislature, it is not fair that, you know, 82 billion is the budget federally. Obviously, in Washington State, it's a lot less than that. You could have a
Hmm.
tiny little wealth tax and easily, have fully funded schools in our states. But the
Right.
current political structure isn't set up for that. So it's going to take.
So it's about collective functioning systems. That's what I heard. It's about recognizing the way that several systems are working against families instead of supporting them individually and as a whole.
Yep.
Final question, Christian. What does that mean if collective value were real? What would that look, feel, and function like?
I honestly, I'm gonna use this time to talk about if you pick up some of these books, then you would kind of see the world that we can envision, right? Like,
Hmm.
read Black Panther Woman by Mary Frances Phillips about the life of Erica Huggins. Read anything that Toni Morrison has written on the imagination. Octavia Butler, and what I'll say is it's relational. It's a place
Hmm.
where I had the privilege of even just having a conversation with Erica Huggins and asking like, what can we do? If anyone wants to do something, what do you do? She just said, look out the window. Like, so I hope a world of collective value we can see that there's an injustice and that we
Hmm.
are able to act and not be fearful. And that's a world like we can see something. You see someone hungry, feed them. Like that is the world we really believe in collective value. If we can all accomplish those things, that's what I'm hopeful the world could look like. Where if we see something, we can do something about it. And just look for opportunities to lift each other up, but as well as take care of ourselves. I think um, we want to close with that too. Is collective value is also you are part of that collective. You got to take care of yourself too.
Thank you both for all the information, all the different vantage points and resources, and for doing this work every day. It's not easy work. It is a marathon, and y'all have decided to take part in it in an active role, not just for yourselves, but in the communities that you support. So thank you both.
Yeah, thank you, Sam.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Darren.